Greetings to my dear guests on this video. I wish you a pleasant viewing and look forward to your feedback in the comments. The first time I saw him, he was walking through the open plan floor like he was entering a party thrown in his honor. Tan face, expensive haircut, laughing a little too loud as the executive team buzzed around him. Clay Beringer, the board's shiny new solution. A man from finance, not tech. And that was all I needed to know. He didn't shake my hand that day. He just winked. "I've heard your name already," he said. "Jordy, the systems queen. I like people who build things." Then he was gone, on to the next handshake, the next smile. It was performative, but he was good at it. The following week, his influence began to spread like spilled coffee, fast and sticky. First, he banned remote work without notice. Then, no personal mugs. Branding confusion, he said. Every Thursday was now Power Hour, a mandatory full-company Zoom session with motivational speakers. He renamed the internal lunchroom the Strategy Cafe. And the worst, he had the tech floor's shared whiteboard painted over and replaced with a vision wall. We were expected to write inspirational phrases on Post-its and stick them there. People started whispering in the hallways again, this time with less excitement and more dread. Several team leads were reassigned. One of the older engineers was encouraged to pursue opportunities better aligned with his lifestyle. Everyone knew what that meant, but somehow I was untouched. More than untouched. He kept stopping by my office. "Jordy," he'd say, leaning on the doorframe like we were old pals. "Can I borrow your brain for a second?" He'd compliment my data intuition, ask vague questions about the system I'd built, then shift the topic to podcasts or his CrossFit routine. It made no sense. One afternoon, after another spontaneous compliment in the break room, this time about my unique professional calm, I asked him, half joking, "You're not planning to rename the system dashboard next, are you?" He laughed. "Not unless you think it needs rebranding. Actually, I was thinking we could evolve it. Put your name on it. Turn it into a product." I smiled politely, but something inside me flinched. He was fishing, and I wasn't sure what for. The system wasn't something I bragged about. I'd built it over years, layering it piece by piece, and filed the patent in my name quietly, well before the company started depending on it. It wasn't theft. It was foresight. The company used a license. They didn't own it. I hadn't told anyone about that, not even HR. And now this man, who couldn't code his way out of a login screen, was sniffing around like he smelled opportunity. I started documenting everything. Not because I knew what was coming, but because my gut told me something was off. I didn't sleep well that night. It wasn't just Clay's odd comment about evolving the system or putting my name on it like it hadn't been mine all along. It was the way he said it. Friendly, eager. But beneath it, I could hear the tone of someone who'd already decided how to reshape something they didn't understand. He was a man used to seeing everything as a transaction. By the end of the week, 3 mid-level managers were gone. Fired, relocated, or off-boarded to strategic partnerships, whatever euphemism the HR director had agreed to that week. Nobody said it out loud, but we all knew. He was cleaning house. Except for me. In fact, he started inviting me to meetings I'd never been asked to join before. Strategy sessions, branding discussions, executive overviews of operations. I'd sit quietly at the end of the table, watching him spin ideas that made no logistical sense, then turn to me with that grin. "What do you think, Jordy? You've got the tech intuition." I kept my answers neutral, measured, professional. I knew better than to show my hand. One afternoon, after a particularly long meeting where Clay had proposed outsourcing the help desk and replacing it with an AI chatbot to give the company more of a Silicon Valley feel, he pulled me aside. "Walk with me," he said. We passed the cubicles, some of them empty now, then turned down a quiet hallway near the server rooms. "You're one of the few people here I actually respect," he said. "No drama, no ego. You get things done. I see that. Thank you, I said, though I didn't trust a word of it. Which is why I'm thinking, he continued, we could bring the system under a company-wide rebrand, make it proprietary, expand it. You'd be the face of it, of course, but we'd own the IP together. Think about it. This could be your legacy. I stopped walking. My voice was calm, but I looked him straight in the eye. Clay, that system is already protected, and it's not under company IP. He blinked. What? I filed the patent 5 years ago, personally. RennerTech uses it under license. His smile faltered, just a touch. Then it returned. Well, that's an unusual arrangement. It was necessary, I said. The company was going through a volatile period. Layoffs, leadership changes. I built that system alone, in my own time. No one funded it, no one asked me to, but they relied on it. If RennerTech had gone under, the entire backbone of operations would have collapsed, and my work with it. I took a breath. My lawyer advised I protect it. So I did. Quietly, ethically. It's never been a problem. Until now, apparently. He nodded slowly, like he was recalibrating. I'll want to see the license terms, he said. You'll find them in legal archives, or I can have my lawyer forward the agreement. He didn't say anything for a moment. Then he laughed lightly and clapped his hand on my shoulder. You're sharper than I thought. That's good. I like sharp. But his eyes had changed, and I knew what that meant. The friendliness had been a mask, a soft approach to ownership. Now that it was off the table, the game would shift. That evening, I stayed late and backed up every version of the code I had, both on and off-site. I encrypted the backups with new keys. I changed the admin passwords and documented every access log since the last update. It wasn't fear that pushed me. It was habit. Protection was something I'd learned after my husband died. When no one else will protect your work, your stability, your future, you do it yourself. And Clay? He wasn't the first man who smiled at me while planning something behind my back. He wouldn't be the last. But he would regret assuming I was just another employee. It started like any other morning. Cold coffee, quiet desk, login screen. I'd taken the previous Thursday off for a long overdue visit to my sister's place upstate. 2 days offline. I didn't even bring my laptop. I needed the break. My inbox was messy but manageable. Nothing unusual. That's why the knock at 9:13 a.m. threw me. 2 people, one from HR, the other from compliance. Julia, we need a moment of your time. Not a smile, not a hint of warmth. Just that flat, official tone, the one you never want to hear. They led me to a small meeting room at the far end of the hallway. The blinds were already drawn. Inside was a printed packet with my name on it. We've identified a serious violation of internal data access policies, the HR rep said. I blinked. What? You were logged in from a personal device last Thursday night and accessed 3 restricted system directories. These actions were flagged by our monitoring protocols. I stared at her. That's not possible. I wasn't even home Thursday. I was in Albany. I didn't log in. Her expression didn't change. We have the logs. I wasn't even on the network. It doesn't change the audit findings. They pushed the packet toward me. Pages of evidence, timestamps, access logs, red highlighted IP addresses. None of it looked familiar. But I knew how this worked. You can forge a trail if you have the right level of access, and someone clearly did. I didn't do this, I said calmly, and I think you know that. The compliance officer shifted in his seat. He knew, I could see it, but it wasn't about guilt. It was about narrative, and I was already the story they wanted to tell. You're being terminated effective immediately. Your system access has been disabled. You'll be escorted back to your desk to collect your things. Then security will walk you out. Just like that. No hearing, no chance to speak to legal, no warning, just erased. They handed me a blank envelope with my name scribbled in ballpoint ink. We'll mail the rest. I didn't cry. Not then. I walked back down the hall like I was watching someone else's life. My desk, familiar, safe, mine, was now just a collection of objects I didn't even want to touch. I dropped my ID badge in the tray without being asked. Nobody looked at me. Not directly. They didn't need to. They already knew. This wasn't about stolen data. It wasn't even about me. It was about power. I was too close to Jordy. I worked too closely with her. I didn't pull away when the others did. I smiled at her in the hallway, asked her questions, showed loyalty. And Clay noticed. He didn't confront me. He didn't ask me to cooperate or distance myself. He just had me erased. Because if he could remove me, quiet, professional Julia Crane, he could make anyone disappear. I saw Jordy once more as I passed by the server access door. She was inside, her back to the glass, typing something fast and sharp. I didn't wave. I didn't knock. But I wanted to say so many things. To warn her, to tell her not to trust anyone anymore, not to open her files on the company's machines, not to let him near the source code. But there was no time. When I stepped into the elevator, I saw my reflection in the steel doors. Gray cardigan, pressed slacks, sensible shoes. A harmless woman, a loyal worker, a shadow. And now? Just another name scrubbed from the system. At home, I stared at the blank walls of my apartment. I thought of writing a post on LinkedIn, of going to the press, of finding a lawyer. But I knew how this worked. They'd bury it, frame it as an internal matter, say I'd been unstable, create just enough doubt to make people move on. Instead, I did the only thing I could. I sent one email, to a private address, Jordy's backup account, the one she mentioned once, offhandedly, when she was migrating some old access logs. He's coming for you next. Whatever he couldn't take from me, he'll try to take from you. Be ready, and don't trust what you see in the logs. They're not clean anymore. Then I hit send, deleted the thread, and closed the laptop. I don't know what Jordy will do next, but I hope she knows she's not alone, because even when the system says you're gone, not everything gets deleted. They thought I'd disappear. They thought I'd sit in my apartment, stew in shame, maybe try to job hunt like a good corporate casualty. But they forgot who they fired. I didn't build systems for nothing. I didn't spend 6 years mapping back-end architecture and access paths just to vanish. I knew exactly how Rennertech worked. More importantly, I knew how to listen without being heard. When they locked me out, they missed a few threads. Unimportant, barely indexed subsystems Jordy and I used for clean code testing. She created them back in the early days when legal still thought tech infrastructure was a whiteboard and a dream. No one had thought to flag those sandbox branches in the main server reconfigurations, and I'd left a whisper there, a signal, a crack. Enough for me to see what was happening. I wasn't watching everything. I wasn't stupid. I stayed off anything sensitive. But I saw enough. I saw that the day after I was walked out, Clay blocked Jordy from the legacy dashboard. I saw that her access credentials were rerouted, first for auditing, then just cut off entirely. I saw that the logs Clay had used to frame me were still active, but they'd been relabeled Verified Breach. Verified. As if someone had double-checked them. I almost laughed. But mostly, I watched her. From the outside, she looked the same. Still came in early. Still left just late enough not to raise suspicion. But I could see it. The tension in her shoulders. The new set of alertness in how she moved. She wasn't afraid, but she was preparing. I recognized that posture. I knew it well. She was starting to fight. What Clay didn't understand was that Jordy didn't scare easily. He thought isolating her would make her unravel, that she'd get desperate, flail, and make a mistake. But Jordy doesn't flail. She rewrites. I watched her trigger an access review, something only someone with her kind of contract would even know how to demand. I smiled. Smart. No accusations. No outbursts. Just procedural pressure. I knew what she was doing, setting a trail. Because even if legal ignored it now, it would live in the record. I wanted to do more, desperately, but I couldn't get too close, not yet. So I did the only thing I could. I created a new channel, untraceable, built from a disposable IP, and dropped her a message. They're watching your personal device. Don't use it inside the building. No name. No hint it came from me. Just the truth. Because Clay had crossed a line, and we both knew it. I wasn't afraid for myself anymore. I'd already lost everything. But Jordy hadn't. And she was the last person left who understood how deep the roots of that system ran. What she built wasn't just code. It was the architecture of how Rennertech survived chaos. It was the net that caught them when their leadership flailed. And Clay? He thought he could burn it all down and install his own empire on the ashes. What a fool. You don't win wars by deleting people. You win them by understanding who your enemies are. And I wasn't his enemy anymore. Jordy was. But she wasn't alone. Not really. There are two kinds of silence after a scandal like mine. The first is the kind the company creates. Scrubbed names, deleted messages, quiet elevator conversations that stop when someone else walks in. The second is the one you sit in yourself. Alone. Off payroll. Off the record. Watching the emails dry up. The phone calls stop. But I wasn't idle. I couldn't be. When I saw them demote Jordy's job title in the company calendar, I knew what was next. They weren't just trying to push her out. They were trying to erase her the way they erased me. The way they always erase women who don't obey quietly. I didn't have access to the full system anymore, but I still had breadcrumbs. The sandbox zone she and I used for debugging hadn't been purged. No one remembered it existed. It wasn't connected to any alert system. But if I asked it the right questions in the right way, it answered. The first thing I noticed was a permissions flag. Jordy's admin rights were gone. No notice, no documentation, just stripped. Next came the HR memos. I saw a shift in her title, rebranded as Internal Systems Coordinator. A title Clay invented, I'm sure. Soft enough to sound real, hollow enough to hold no power. Then came the call from HR asking her to reformat her documentation. I could guess every word of that conversation. It was a trick. They wanted her to put her architecture into company format, so they could rebuild it and cut her out. Cleanly. Legally. But they didn't know Jordy. She responded the only way she ever would, by documenting everything, copying legal, and refusing to play dumb. I wanted to scream, to storm back in and blow the whole thing open, but that would ruin everything. So I took the next step quietly. There was still one place Clay hadn't touched, the external compliance archive. Months before I was terminated, I had done a series of internal audits for a contractor. I remembered the folder, buried deep in a private company drive. It was never erased because no one remembered it was there. Not Clay, not legal, not even IT. Inside it, I found gold. A memo from Clay's assistant, forwarding false HR language for performance terminations. Dates and names redacted, but the pattern was unmistakable. An access script showing how system admins had been rewritten to forward credential logs to an unregistered third-party domain. That was illegal. And finally, a message. A chat screenshot. Clay, writing to someone in leadership. She won't last another week. I'll break her or she'll walk. I copied everything, encrypted it, put it on a drive, a clean one, and I sent it. No name, no return address. Just dropped it in the physical inbox Jordy still had near her workstation. I timed it perfectly, right before the evening office cleaning shift. No one saw me. And that night, I sat by my window and watched the streetlights flicker across my building's brick wall. I didn't feel proud. I felt focused. Clay had miscalculated. He thought he was playing chess against a pawn, but he'd forgotten who taught Jordy to log access trails, who showed her how to mask code for integrity audits, who'd been there building the invisible walls no one could see. Me. They took everything from me, my job, my reputation, my right to reply. But I still had my hands. I still had the truth. And I was going to make sure someone saw it, even if it wasn't through me, even if it was through her. Because this war? It wasn't about control anymore. It was about proof. And Clay had finally left fingerprints. 3 days passed before anything happened. 3 long days of silence. I told myself not to check the system, not to look, to let it breathe, but I couldn't help it. The third morning, I logged in through the sandbox relay, slow, quiet, buried beneath 100 decoy queries, and checked the employee access activity log. Not her main one, just the metadata, the shadows. There it was. Access spike at 7:23 p.m. external port. Air gap device. Read-only action. No outbound traffic. She found the drive. She opened the files. I exhaled. Deep, long. She knew. Now it was just a matter of time. Clay still didn't suspect. The office updates came through like clockwork. Newsletter blurbs about leadership transparency and forward movement. The kind of language that means nothing and demands less. But I could see the rhythm of the place changing. Jordy wasn't submitting any new reports. She wasn't replying to open work orders. She was, in effect, silent. But I knew that silence. It wasn't retreat. It was preparation. She was digging in, the same way she used to debug an unresolved recursive loop, quiet, precise, with a hint of threat beneath the surface. And then, on Friday, I saw it happen. A file transfer notification flagged in the audit logs. Nothing unusual on the surface, except for the recipient, a small third-party compliance consulting firm. I remembered them. I'd worked with them once during a vendor audit years ago. They were quiet, but efficient. The file she sent was labeled Internal Risk Summary, Licensing Conflict Inquiry. No direct accusations, just a request for contractual interpretation regarding system oversight and misuse of licensed infrastructure by executives outside authorized channels. Brilliant. She was getting ahead of it, laying the foundation for third-party validation. Because once a third-party investigator touches that file, it's no longer internal. Clay wouldn't see it coming. I smiled, and then I opened my secure folder and started writing again. I listed every interaction I could remember with Clay or anyone in his orbit, every unusual access request I'd been asked to fulfill, every message I'd been copied on without explanation. I didn't need revenge. I needed chronology, facts. Fiction bends under facts. And when I finished writing, I encrypted it all. I didn't send it. Not yet. But I stored it on a second flash drive and hid it in my apartment's breaker box, taped to the inside panel. A habit I'd picked up from an old friend in IT security. Hide things where no one looks unless the power goes out, he'd once said. That night, I got a new message. Not from Jordy, but from someone else. An unregistered IP. One I didn't recognize. The subject line was a single word. Careful. No body text, no attachment, no trace. I stared at it for a long time. It wasn't from Jordy. She would have said more, said it plainly. This was someone else, which meant something was happening inside Rennertech that I couldn't see. Either someone had found my signal, or someone else had started watching. For the first time in weeks, I felt something I hadn't allowed myself to feel. Fear. Because if Clay was digging now, not just scrubbing logs or shifting HR stories, but actively hunting, I might not have much longer. But I didn't back off. I scanned the system one last time that night and saw something else, a line item in the HR schedule. A closed-door meeting scheduled under the innocuous name, Executive Realignment Session. The attendees? Clay Beringer, the CFO, and Jordy. I sat very still, because there it was, the move. He was going to try to finish it. He thought this meeting would end her. He had no idea it was going to be the beginning. I didn't sleep the night before the meeting. Something about the message, careful, wouldn't let me rest. It wasn't the word. It was the silence behind it. Whoever sent it wasn't just warning me, they were scared. Which meant someone else inside that building finally saw what I saw. The realignment meeting was set for 11 a.m. Friday. Closed room. No minutes recorded. Just the 3 names on the schedule, plus a redacted fourth, likely an assistant or silent observer. I stared at those names on the spreadsheet until they blurred. Clay, the CFO, Jordy. I knew how Clay operated. He didn't fire people in meetings. That wasn't his style. He made you fire yourself, made you look volatile, emotional, unfit. Especially if you were a woman. He'd bait her, maybe offer her a voluntary transition, a buyout, or worse, a fabricated performance violation. Then he'd let her walk herself out the door. But this wasn't the Jordy I'd known when we first started working together. That Jordy would have tried to fix things from within. This Jordy? She'd seen the playbook. She had it memorized. At 11 a.m., I logged into the Sandbox system and watched for digital movement. Nothing appeared for 10 minutes. Then, at 11:13, a spike, one of Jordy's encrypted pings. A signal. One we'd created back in the day for confirming multi-factor patch deployment. A meaningless echo to most. But to me, it meant one thing. I'm fine. Hold position. I exhaled. But 5 minutes later, something else popped up. A second ping, slower, different string pattern. He's trying something. I closed the Sandbox, opened the metadata relay I'd installed before I was fired, and there it was, a policy change request, time-stamped and ready for signature. It had been drafted that morning. 8:44 a.m. Clay was trying to push a unilateral override of all license-based infrastructure access. His argument? Operational necessity in light of proprietary conflicts. He was attempting to take the system, illegally, and he had no idea the timestamp on that draft would bury him, because at 9:02 a.m., I had already received confirmation from the third-party compliance firm Jordy contacted. They had opened an official inquiry. Any override attempt made after that timestamp would legally constitute bad faith retaliation against a known license holder. Jordy knew that too, and she was letting him walk into it. I could only imagine what that room felt like. Cold chairs, thin coffee, Clay's fake smile growing tighter by the second as Jordy didn't flinch. And then I saw the final blow. At 11:41 a.m., a secured outbound email left the legal department. It was addressed to the board of directors and blind copied to outside counsel. Subject line: Compliance escalation. Executive misuse of system access authority. I sat back. She'd done it. She hadn't waited for Clay to finish. She'd triggered the exposure while still sitting across from him. The room must have gone silent. I imagined Clay blinking, tilting his head like he always did when caught off guard. He'd try to laugh it off, call it a misunderstanding, maybe even call Jordy emotional in that patronizing tone I knew too well. But the timestamp wouldn't lie. He had drafted the override after a legal inquiry had been launched. That was enough. Enough for an audit. Enough for a board review. Enough to start pulling threads that would unravel everything. For the first time in months, I felt something I hadn't let myself feel. Relief. But I didn't celebrate. Not yet. Because Clay wouldn't go quietly. Predators rarely do. And if he couldn't break her, he'd try to discredit her. That's when I started preparing my release plan. I took the flash drive I'd stashed in the breaker box and mirrored it onto 2 new drives. One I mailed, unsigned, untraceable, to a trusted former contact in the tech press. The second I stored at a digital drop point used by whistleblower networks. And then I backed up the entire trail, including the override attempt, the pings, the policy draft, to a private legal vault. If anything happened to Jordy, it would be public by morning. He wouldn't bury her without burying himself. This time, I wasn't just watching from the outside. I was part of the firewall, and he just triggered it. I expected silence. After the board escalation, After Jordy's quiet counterattack, I thought Clay would retreat, regroup, maybe pull back his claws. I was wrong. The following Monday, the internal chatter changed. I picked it up in metadata traces, conversation pings between exec-level accounts. Something was different. Panic. There was a closed-door emergency meeting on the 9th floor, unlisted on the calendar, no name attached. But the system flagged it anyway because someone forgot to remove room metadata. The room had only been reserved once in the last 6 months, during a CFO audit. That meant legal was inside. And Clay? He wasn't, at least not officially. But the strangest signal came from the behavior on the ground. Someone, probably someone on the board, had issued a security review of all active access protocols company-wide. It didn't look like much, just an internal check. But I recognized the pattern. They were validating Jordy's claims, trying to see if what she'd reported about the override attempts could be confirmed without admitting she was right. That's how corporate survival works. They'll let you burn as a whistleblower, but if the fire gets too close to the walls, they start looking for hoses. By Wednesday, I saw the signs of Clay's unraveling. First, his calendar was cleared. No new meetings, no department check-ins. Then, his assistant was locked out of the executive suite. And finally, a message appeared in the shared HR draft log. Prepare interim leadership protocols. That's when I knew. The board was turning on him, but Clay wasn't going to go out quietly, because later that night, just past 11 p.m., a ping hit the sandbox. Unusual. Sloppy. It was a server request, masked as an internal cache refresh, but it was really pulling down backups of old system architecture. It was him. He was trying to make a copy of the system before he lost access completely. Desperate, but also dangerous. If he succeeded, he could still sell the illusion of control. He could approach a partner or vendor and pitch the system as transitioning IP, muddying the waters of ownership, forcing Jordy to fight it all over again in court. I needed to stop him, but I couldn't interfere directly. I had no legal grounds. So I did the only thing I could. I released the story. I took the flash drive I had prepared weeks earlier, the one with logs, time-stamped policy drafts, and the chat message about breaking her, and uploaded it to the secured Dropbox of a quiet but reputable investigative journalist I'd worked with once during a compliance tip-off. No fanfare, no name, just facts. 23 files, 2 internal memos, 1 personal message from Clay's internal chat history, and a simple subject line. Renner Tech, internal retaliation, system theft, license breach. I signed it with my initials, JC. I didn't expect it to publish immediately. I knew how media worked. They'd sit on it, vet it, maybe reach out to Renner Tech's board. But it didn't need to go public right away. It only needed to exist, because even the threat of exposure slows men like Clay down. By Thursday, Jordy had locked the system with a double verification protocol. She knew he was trying to clone it. I saw the new encryption layers hit the server tree like steel doors. And then I saw her final move. A single outbound email to legal, CCing board members with one line. In the event of unauthorized duplication of protected code, Clause 9.4 will activate. I had to look it up. I remembered Clause 9.4 vaguely from my own contract days. It was simple. If any licensed code was copied or removed from company servers without consent, Jordy had the legal right to revoke all system usage, immediately. It would bring operations to a halt. And everyone knew it. Clay didn't just lose the system that day. He lost his threat, because Jordy had burned the bridge behind him and left him stranded on his own side of the fire. By the time Friday arrived, the office was quiet. Too quiet. Clay hadn't shown up. Rumors said he was taking a few days. Others whispered suspended. But I didn't care anymore, because for the first time since I was erased, the silence wasn't fear. It was control. Jordy had it back, and I was finally breathing again. Friday morning, the article dropped. Not on a splashy site, not a tabloid. A quiet digital outlet, industry-facing, reputable, with just enough reach to land in the inboxes of investors, board members, and industry leaders before anyone could spin it. Renner Tech whistleblower alleges as internal retaliation, illegal system, hijack attempt. Byline: source requests anonymity, evidence reviewed by editorial and legal teams. The documents I'd released were included as an interactive packet, each item time-stamped, each claim matched against company policies. They'd even annotated the chat message from Clay: "I'll break her or she'll walk." There was no turning back now. By 9 a.m., Jordy had locked down the system for real, not just internal use, but remote API access, reporting dashboards, analytics feeds, every layer, every node, read-only access for all but 2 people. I wasn't one of them, but I didn't need to be. Because by then, Jordy had done what very few people managed to do in a company like Renner Tech. She'd taken the system offline, without taking herself down with it. Clay, on the other hand, was gone. Not suspended. Not on leave. Gone. Word came through back channels before it ever hit formal HR. An internal investigator, someone I knew from my early days in compliance, forwarded a single sentence to my secure relay. Clay Beringer's contract terminated effective immediately. NDA pending. No farewell email, no statement, just the quiet implosion of a man who thought no one could stop him. They'd try to bury it, of course, protect shareholders, reframe the narrative. But the audit logs were already public. The timestamps were in the wild. The journalist who published the story had followed up with a second piece, this time citing 2 independent legal experts, confirming that Jordy's system had been protected under enforceable licensing. The message was clear. Clay hadn't just broken policy. He'd broken the law. Jordy didn't gloat. She didn't make speeches. She didn't post online. She showed up Monday like nothing had happened, walked through reception, swiped her badge, sat at her desk, but her badge had been restored. Full access, original title, and something else. A quiet new nameplate on the glass of her office door. Head of System Architecture, Interim CTO. I stared at that line when it appeared in the directory refresh, not because it was surprising, but because it was right. Jordy had built everything. She'd held it together when the company flailed. And when they came for her, she didn't scream or beg or run. She documented. She planned. She endured. And now, she led. Later that afternoon, I received a message. It came to my secure email, encrypted, digitally signed with Jordy's token, no text, just an attached file, a zipped folder, inside it, all my old access logs, restored, labeled, reinstated, JC, archival consultant, private advisory role. I didn't cry, but I sat back in my chair and stared at the screen for a long time. I had no badge, no payroll, no seat in the building, but I was back. And more importantly, I had a name again, not erased, not forgotten, just quiet. And in the tech world, sometimes that's all the power you need. Jordy and I never spoke about revenge, because this was never about that. This was about restoration. And the thing about systems? If you build them strong enough, they survive the people who try to corrupt them.